Today I'm talking to Mark Silver from heartofbusiness.com, and we cover a topic I find extremely interesting, and that is building a heart-based business. Because life and business don't have to be separate. You can follow your heart and you can do work that nourishes you. So in this episode we cover a lot of juicy topics, such as why it's okay to struggle when you're getting started, and the truth about people who make six figures quickly with their business. And we also talk about why it's not enough to follow your passion. And there's plenty more. I just wanted to give you a taste of what you'll discover as you keep listening. So without further ado, let's dive into the interview. I'm sure you'll love it.
So today I'm here with Mark Silver from heartofbusiness.com, and we're going to be talking about how you can build a thriving business without losing your heart. So how are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing well. How are you, Henry?
Doing good. A bit of a problem with my voice, but things should be good. So for the people listening, could you shortly introduce yourself and let's start things from there?
Sure. Well, this company that I have, Heart of Business, has been going since 2001. I've been doing this work since 1999 in one form or another, and then it got officially born in 2001. And it was the intersection of studies that I was doing in a Sufi healing school, spiritual healing school, and work that I was doing with a lot of holistic healers and people that were self-employed, including my wife, in supporting people in having thriving practices and being able to reach the people that they wanted to reach. I grew up in small business. My parents had a retail store that was my grandfather's from the 30s, and I actually turned away from that and became an activist. Didn't really like business for a long time because of what I saw business doing to the world, especially large global corporate business. And at the same time, as I journeyed through activism and did some other things, ran a nonprofit, I was a paramedic in the 911 system for 8 years. Eventually coming back to the fact that there are a lot of people doing amazing work that's really, really needed, and they can't connect with the people that need them most. At the same time, there's tremendous amounts of money flowing through our economy in a very dysfunctional way on goods and services that are, to put it politely, not life-affirming. And I just wanted to be a part of helping people connect with, people who are wanting to make a difference in the world, connect with and do better for themselves and for the people they're trying to help. And as I began to catch as my activist roots kind of came full circle, I began to see that I really wanted to be a part of helping the economy heal, helping to heal our dysfunctional economy and culture, which business has done so much damage to over the last few centuries.
Yeah, so you bring together the Sufi side, business, and the healing, because the way I look at things is that just because many businesses are not, as you put it, life-affirming, doesn't mean that our businesses can't be.
Exactly. I firmly believe, and I experience, that every act of business can be an act of love, but it's a choice. It's a choice of whether what we're doing is coming from love and an expression of love and being effective versus feeling like there's no love there and we have to disconnect from what we love most in order to somehow be effective in the marketplace, which of course just increases the pain and the suffering.
Yeah, and I find it's the hardest in the beginning to get into that place where you can come from your heart and feel like you're actually giving to people, because there are all these fears and beliefs we picked up that we don't have anything to share, we're not good enough, or we're not doing things right. So do you come up against any of these fears with your clients and as you help them build their business?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's a lot of folks out there that just don't, our culture is it's so painful. There's so much to grieve. I was having a conversation with some friends last night about some of the painful dysfunctions and systems in our that are active in our culture, and just how they disempower us and how they leave us feeling less than and in comparison and disconnected from our hearts and from love. And spiritually, the way back is through, right? It's like there's some teachings that float out in the common culture that say, oh, you just want to rise above it, you just want to step into your magnificence, you just want to. But what I've noticed is that from the spiritual teachings that have resonated with the truth that I've experienced in my life is that we're really made to be in service. We're really at our happiest and most fulfilled when we're humble, when we're in service, when we're not trying to be too big. We're not trying to be bigger than we are. We don't want to be smaller than we are. We don't want to be collapsed, because that's not really that's not healthy at all either. But we don't want to go to the opposite side and just inflate ourselves to some grandiosity. And I think that's where people often disconnect in business, especially around marketing and sales, but in business in a lot of different areas. And instead of feeling the need to inflate oneself and be grand, it's much better to be in a humble place, to be in service, to realize that, oh, I'm a vessel. I don't need to inflate myself. And that actually undoes these fears about, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm not anything. Because when you recognize the truth of the human being, which is that we aren't anything, in some fundamentally true way, we aren't anything,
Yeah.
then that allows us to be humble, and allows something greater, a greater love and a greater presence to come through us and express ourselves through us. And that's much more nourishing in life, and it's much more powerful and effective in business.
Yeah, and this is something I've noticed in my journey in life and business as well, is that the more I've kept doing things, working on building my business and growing as a human being, is that it's okay to be who we are, because we can't really be someone we're not. So when we try to force progress in our business, or try to be someone and write amazing contents right off the bat, or whatever definitions that hold us down, that's when we get into trouble. And when we let go of those definitions and ideas and fears and beliefs, that's when things really start to happen, and that's when things sometimes become more effortless.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So in terms of the mistakes you see when someone is starting their business and they want to follow their heart, they want to do something they enjoy doing, or help people they are passionate about helping, what are some of the mistakes you see people run into who are just starting and growing their business?
Well, it's a very interesting thing that you just said there, because you said when people want to do something that they are passionate about, or they want to serve people. And those two questions are actually two very different questions. I find that it is important to do something that we enjoy, something that's alive for us. I love small business, and I enjoy it tremendously. So it's easy to build a business around it. But there's a difference between an art form and a business, or a hobby and a business, or a pursuit and a business. Because a business, the reason that a business exists, or the reason that a business will continue to exist in a profitable manner, is because it solves a problem for someone. It solves some problem for some person, hopefully many people. And without that orientation of wanting to be in service to some group of people who are struggling with some kind of problem and to help them with it, the business falters. And I think a lot of people, especially people in the holistic health field, but a lot of people generally get so wowed by what it is that they're doing. They're so in love with the modality or the thing that they're doing that they lose sight of who they're trying to serve and what problem they're trying to solve. One of my personal heroes, Mother Teresa, I was so struck that when she heard the call to go and help the poor in Calcutta, and she first went out among the poor, And she realized, like, oh, okay, so I have all this training as a nun, but these people are sick and they're hurt, and some of them are dying. One of the very first things she did was she went and took a first aid course because she saw what people needed, and she wasn't so attached to how she wanted to do things, and instead just was, how can I get the help to the people? And her focus was so deeply on serving. And I think that that's a fundamental perspective, fundamentally powerful perspective that all business owners, especially new business owners, need to have. And it makes things much easier um, to help make the business profitable, and it feels better.
Yeah, what I've found myself doing in almost right away when I got started is that I started focusing on what people wanted. So I bumped into people like Sean D'Souza and Chris Garrett, who talk a lot about listening to your audience and solving problems, like you just said. And what that reminded me of is that when I focus on other people and serving my clients and customers, that actually helps alleviate a lot of the fears of I'm not good enough and am I doing this right? Because I'm just helping people, and then if they need more, they'll ask for more and they'll want me to help them with more problems.
Exactly, exactly. One of the universal assessments or kind of ways of undoing any kind of frozen feeling that one has around marketing is to say, oh, am I looking at myself or am I looking at the people I'm serving? And most of the issues that arise out of marketing that people have emotionally with marketing arise out of the fact, most of them, not all, but most arise out of the fact that they're looking at themselves and they're worried about how they're being perceived. They're worried about whether they're going to be good enough. And, I was a paramedic for 8 years. And one of the things that I saw over and over again is that when people are hurt, other people help. They just help. They don't stop and think, am I qualified? Am I a paramedic? Do I have the right licensure? It's like, you arrive on scene and people are helping other people. It's a natural tendency in us. If any of us were to come across a child who was crying, we'd immediately want to go help them. And so when you can see the suffering or the struggle or the pain that's going on and the people that you want to help, it naturally pulls you forward to want to help them. And there's a self-consciousness that dissolves, that you lose in that process, that is wonderfully nourishing and helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And something you touched on is that it's not enough to just follow your passion, because I talk a lot about finding your passion, following your excitement, and listening to your heart. But you also have to find what I call the intersection between actually finding something you enjoy, but also thinking about what problem you're solving and finding a problem people are willing to pay for if you want to build a real business.
Yes. Yes, I absolutely agree. We have our approach has what we call the one compelling sentence, which is both a core marketing message, but it's also the definition of what your business is. And it's comprised of who you're helping and what problem you're solving for them. It's just the same thing I've been saying all along, but it's really like, that's in my mind how a business is defined. It's not defined by what you do, it's defined by who you help and what problem you solve.
Yeah, and that brings us perfectly to my next question, which is, how do you discover who you want to help and what you help them with? It's the age-old finding your niche question.
Right. Well, here's what I want to say about that. You choose. It's really in some ways as difficult and as simple as that. I think there's been a lot that's arisen in certain self-help circles around, finding your purpose in life. And what the Sufi teachings tell us is that our purpose in life is to express our heart. There's a jewel in our heart that we carry, a particular quality or combination of qualities that we carry. And our hearts are going to express that no matter what we do. And when we can become conscious of it, we can help it develop more consciously. We can express it more consciously. We can connect with people. But no matter what you do, whether you're with your family, whether you're with friends, whether you're in a job you hate, when you're in your best moments, that's going to be expressed in the most, in a much closer to pure form. And when you're doing something that you really enjoy, then it starts to become expressed even more powerfully. And the divine, the spirit, oneness, the mystery, doesn't care whether you're a tinker or a tailor or a candlestick maker. It's like that's the physical world. You get to choose. And so what I tell people is I say, if you're worried about your purpose, if you're worried about making a wrong decision, focus on your heart. What is it that your heart wants to express as a message? And it's rarely going to touch on this issue of who you're helping and what you're serving. It's going to have something to do with a much more fundamental truth around love or compassion or wisdom or connection or, peace. It's going to be these more elemental teachings. And then you can then ask yourself, with that pressure of your purpose off your shoulders, and start to say, well, what part of the world, what kind of people just call to me? Where am I interested? What kind of problems do I see that look like fun or interesting or enlivening for me to work with? And there's probably going to be a number of them. And you choose one. You choose one area. And you realize that doesn't have to be for the rest of your life. It's just for the next few years while you get your business going. And when you get some momentum going, you can then decide, okay, am I going to continue doing this, or am I going to do something else?
Yeah, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think a trap people fall into, especially in the beginning, is they think they have to find the perfect niche. So, and basically, to me, this almost always comes from fear. So it's the fear of failing. They want to guarantee that something's gonna work out, but really, the guarantee of success is, like you said, following your heart and listening to where your heart is guiding you, because all of these ideas we have are what's stopping us. So it's the things we've learned, and when we come back to our heart and really listen where it's taking us, that's when things start becoming clear, or at least you start discovering what your next steps are.
I think so. And the one point I want to go back to the point that you just said about people are worried about, they want to guarantee that something's going to work out. I think that that's true. And I think it's true for very, very strongly for some people. But I think for many of us, because the human heart is made to serve, we want to contribute. And I think there's a pressure of people wanting to get right. Like, I want to really contribute. I don't want to waste my life. I want to do what I'm supposed to do. And I think that can be paralyzing, because people are worried about not truly expressing themselves or not doing what they are, quote unquote, here to do. And that's where I take so much comfort in these teachings that I've experienced and that I teach as a master teacher in my lineage, that you can relax about that. Like, your heart is going to express that, and that you don't have to have so much pressure on yourself to choose the exact right profession or area that you want to do. It just has to be honest. It has to be sincere. It has to be genuinely helpful, and you have to enjoy it. And and I think that by making it a lighter choice, it becomes easier. I have a great story from a client actually recently, who I was talking to after the fact. She had done one of our programs, and the business that she had brought to our program hadn't ever taken off. Even a year or two later, checking in, it's like, oh my God, it never took off. And what she realized is she was bringing a lot of seriousness to it, to really making it work. But meanwhile, she and her husband had a different business that didn't have that same kind of pressure on it of like, oh, it's serious, I've got to make it. Instead, they were just having fun with it. And it totally took off. Like, that's now their main business. They're grossing over $100,000 a year. They're doing incredible work around sustainability and farming and food and supporting and educating people around that. And it's a beautiful thing. And there was this lightness about it. And in both the business that didn't work and the one that did, she's expressing what we call the jewel. She's expressing the purpose of her life. Her heart is being expressed in a very full way. But one has this lightness that allowed it to succeed, and the other one had this heaviness of pressure that frankly, my discernment is assessment is that it just had too much heaviness on it to gain momentum.
Yeah, I think the part you talked about contribution really hit home, because it feels like there's this, first you have one level where it's try to get things perfect, and then there may be some fear, but really deep down it feels for me like there's this aspect of us that truly wants to contribute, and there may be some fears of not, like you said, contributing enough. But really what it comes down to, at least for me and what I've experienced, is that we have to at least start somewhere, and sometimes or often that somewhere is just contributing in a way that helps one person with one problem, and then it grows from there.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Heart of Business has grown over the decade that it's been in business in tremendous ways, in ways that I would never have imagined. But life is a mystery. We take turns that we would never imagine. And if we try to create with the end in mind, then I think that we find ourselves in the mud more often than not. I'd much rather be in a place of mystery and discovery. And not that I don't have intentions, but I don't have long-term intentions. I have shorter term intentions of what I can see. I can see the horizon. I can, see forward maybe 6 months or 8 months or 12 months. And, our team can work together around that. And we have some, more vague intentions for the future, but they tend to be more around how we want things to feel, or the quality of life we want to have, or but they're not set in stone kind of, 5-year plan type of things, because I just haven't found that very inspiring or helpful or effective or true.
Yeah, I find I'm very much the same way. So I have intentions and an overall direction, and then I just tap into my heart. I listen to my heart, and I look to my heart as kind of an inner GPS. Do you find you do a lot of the same kind of things?
Say that once more. What would help me?
So I have a general direction or intention, as you said, and then I listen to my heart and see where it leads me.
I think what I do, thank you for that. What I do is guidance is a funny thing, because what you're talking about is okay, so what kind of guidance are we finding? How are we leading guidance? And one of the things that I've also discovered, because of this difference between the spiritual dimensions and the physical dimensions, which are, in some ways it's a false separation, because the spiritual and the physical are not separate. But in other ways, I find that the guidance rarely comes in the form of go forward 100 feet, then take a left, then, it's like, it's like it doesn't feel like that. What I feel is I'll feel a yearning in my heart, an emptiness in my heart, a place of neediness in my heart. And I'll connect in my heart to the divine, and I'll allow myself to connect with divine qualities and receive divine qualities. Maybe they're peace or love or strength or compassion or witnessing, or any of the different elemental divine qualities that can be accessed. And as my heart it fills with that quality and begins to experience and witness it, then what happens is that I'm moved in some way. And that movement is, what you were calling, literally following your heart. When your heart is full of love, where does your heart lead you? That's guidance.
Yeah.
It's not printed instructions.
Yeah, you put it in such a good way, because I think I do this. It just happens where I'm feeling good, I'm feeling inspired, and my heart is nourished, and then I'll feel, it's not like instructions, but I'll feel inspired to do something, or nudged to write an article, contact someone, or just something that leads to something. So it's more of an evolving and organic process.
Yes. And I think that it's important to talk about this piece of what you just said. It's like, oh, I'll be nudged to do something and then it will lead to something. And, whatever we do always leads to something else, right? There's always another step. However, I think that a lot of people judge themselves on whether their guidance is correct or whether they're following their heart by the results they're getting. Is my business working? Is my life working? Are things working? And if things aren't working, people can fall into a lot of self-judgment. Oh, I'm not listening to guidance, or I'm not. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes we've disconnected from our heart and it's led us into the rough off of our path. We can't really ever leave our path because our path is our path, but you can get into the rough on the side of the path, and it can be in the brambles and it can be more difficult. But sometimes our path has hills on it. Sometimes our path has rough spots on it. And you can be listening to guidance very clearly. You can be following your heart. And it doesn't necessarily mean that everything's going to be smooth and easy and you're going to be sitting on a beach. It sometimes means that you've got some work ahead of you, and that's okay. That's part of being human. When my wife and I made the decision to get married, we had we got engaged. This was 14 years ago now. She almost immediately after that got really, really sick. And it took her 10 years to recover. And some people could have taken that as guidance that she had made the wrong decision or I had made the wrong decision and that somehow our lives weren't working. But the truth is that our hearts knew something deeper. And it was an incredibly painful, scary, difficult journey for many years. But what happened is that there were huge things around family and connection and love and success that ended up being healed in that journey. And so we can't, our culture, and this is one of the dysfunctions of our culture, is always looking for some kind of an immediate feedback telling us that, yes, success is right here. And sometimes you have to work at it. Sometimes there's work involved. However, your heart will tell you whether you're on the path of love and whether the work you're doing, the hard work, the challenges you're facing, feel like the right challenges. If you can really feel in your heart, if you take the time to be with your heart and to be with love, asking the question, one of my favorite questions to ask in my spiritual practice, we teach our clients, is the question, is love available even here? Facing what I'm facing, is love available even here? And then taking the time to listen. And we can often find that, yes, love is available here. And it's okay that this is challenging.
Yeah. And what comes up for me is that we never know where things may lead. So we may struggle, but that struggle may turn into something else. Like you said, the struggle of when your wife was sick led to something else, but it took hard work and it took time. And another thing I think is important, or that has been important in my life, and I think you'll agree, is to have an inner practice, whether that is meditation or like you do, listening to your heart or something else. I think it's important to just every day take time off and really look inside and relax so you can listen to your heart or listen to that inner guidance and nourish your heart, so you can come from a place of being nourished and not, being, I guess, needy may not be the best word here.
Well, I think needy is the good word. Yeah, exactly. In the Sufi practice is called remembrance, or prayer. And there's, in our culture, again, we have this sense of hunger, right? You get hungry, and when you're hungry, you eat. And unless you have some kind of a dysfunctional relationship or an unhealthy relationship with food, which unfortunately is true for many, many people who are struck with anorexia or bulimia or these kinds of things. It's like we lose that. That's losing a sense of what hunger really means, and it brings in all this self-judgment. But in a normal, healthy person, When you're hungry, you eat and you don't judge yourself. It's like, oh, it's midday. I need to stop and have lunch. And we feel those rumbles that help us know when we need to eat. The same is true for our spiritual heart. And the rumbles of the heart, the thirst of the heart, is when we feel fear, when we feel anger, when we feel sadness, when we feel these pieces of these emotions that indicate that we feel stuck or we feel needy. We're in relationship with our elemental neediness in some way. And there's nothing wrong with that. We haven't done anything wrong. There's nothing broken. We're just thirsty. And the Sufi teaching is that the aim is not to drink to quench your thirst. The aim is to develop the perfect thirst so that you never stop drinking. And if we could realize that we are vessels and that we're always thirsty and we can drink in a limitless amount of love, then we wouldn't be afraid of our feelings of neediness and our feelings of fear, because that would just help us to drink even more deeply. And to go back to this question about struggle, to bring it down to a practical level, I found that, after working with thousands and thousands of people on their businesses over the last decade, and our team too, our practitioners that work with, we've all found that in general, once you start to really focus on business development, no matter how long you've been in business, some people are just starting and some people have been in business for 10 years, but once you start to focus on actually developing your business, it can take anywhere from 18 months to 3 years to really put the pieces in place that create the momentum that enable your business to be dependably in motion and really dependably able to support you. And the fact that it's not there yet in 3 months or in 6 months or in 9 months or in a year, it doesn't mean something's wrong. It just means that it just takes time, like it takes time for a baby to develop. And the more that we can fill our hearts with love during that journey, the more that we know that we can be on that path of just putting one foot in front of the other and doing both the practical things and the spiritual pieces that are needed to make it work.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because I have my questions with notes here, and you're basically reading the notes, and when I run out of the notes, it's time for the next question. So the next question I have is a perfect segue once again, which is, how do we avoid the wanting to force progress in the beginning when it seems like nothing is happening? We're maybe not getting as many clients as we want, or customers, or we're not really figuring things out in the way we want to figure them out.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's two impulses that come from, right? One impulse is the unhealthy feeling of either comparing ourselves to others or the inner turmoil. And the best that you can do with that, which I think is really very effective, is to do these kinds of spiritual practices like I mentioned, to fill your heart with love, to face that. However, on the other side of that, there's some very legitimate reasons that we feel that too, which is that you kind of got to have food on the table. You got to pay the rent. You got to make your life work. And when you have a realistic expectation, like I said, of like, oh, I'm going to need 18 months to 3 years to really make momentum. It might take me anywhere between 6 months and a year to be able to at least hit my squeak by number. I always encourage clients to identify a financial squeak by number, so you know the minimum you need to make without frills, but just so you know you're safe and you're not hungry, and you and your loved ones are taken care of. Once you know that, then you can have a realistic expectation of what you'll need to get there, which is you might need to work part-time while you're doing it. I worked part-time when I first started. You might need to have a loan or depend on a partner who's maybe holding a job. You may need to, there's different things that you may need to do to make it work. And that's okay. I'm not a big fan of cliff diving, of just saying, oh, I'm going to do this. It's amazing. I'm just going to quit my job tomorrow and get this wonderful thing going. And anybody who's been in business knows it just takes time. It takes time. A lot of being in business is these incremental steps over time that enable that if you can keep your doors open long enough, then you will have hopefully gathered enough clients that you'll be in a good place. I have somebody that I'm helping now, actually a family friend, who had a brand new practice. She's been in practice for a year now, and I was helping her, and so she managed to go through a lot of the business development stuff more rapidly than a lot of people do. But still, it's been a year, and a year later, she's making a professional level income. She's making more money than she's made in her life before, and she has a very secure business and secure flow of clients. But the first, we had a lot of conversations in the first 3 to 6 months, 8 months, where she's like, "Oh my God, it's not working financially. I'm freaking out." And she had to deal with some, leaning into some savings, leaning into her partner, leaning into, wherever, a part-time job that she had, and living pretty frugally, but she made it. And that's a much more realistic picture of how people make it than some of the stories people hear of, hitting 6 figures in 90 days, which is insane. I think it's an insane story that's out there.
Yeah, I find the people who have those stories, usually they have a background in business and they have connections they can tap into.
Exactly. They've done it before. Somebody that I had mentored with early on had that story, and I never quite liked that she touted the fact that she did it so quickly, because the truth is that she'd had a different type of business practice that she'd been in for 10 years prior, and she just had a lot of skills and a lot of networks and a lot of confidence in herself, and she was able to just put that in motion very quickly. But for somebody starting from scratch, it's just not realistic that emotionally and spiritually and physically you can put those things in place that rapidly and have it even if you do have enough people that you can build relationships with in that short period of time to actually have enough clients to feel secure.
Yeah, it comes back to the baby concept you mentioned. It's kind of like when you're first born, you aren't gonna just start walking and dancing. But
exactly,
if someone has played something like football and they take up another similar sport like basketball, it's gonna be much easier for them, and they can say, well, in 90 days I became awesome at basketball, and it's so easy. But the truth is, like you said, that it takes time, and when you have the proper realistic expectations, it allows your mind, body, heart, and spirit to relax a bit, because you know that whatever's happening is okay. It's okay to struggle, and it's okay to have a part-time job, and you just have to be consistent and actually stay in there in order to be able to succeed.
Exactly.
And something else you talk about, as I was looking through your videos, reading some articles, you talk about consistency. So actually being in contact with your audience and showing up regularly, so you can, time yourself, so you can be in front of them when they are interested in what you have to offer. So could you talk a bit more about that?
Yes. My father ran my parents, but my father ran the family store after my grandfather retired from it. And they, for years, put an ad in the Washington Post, because this was in Washington, D.C., every week. And it was that consistent presence that helped to keep them in front of people's eyes. Now, at some point in the late 90s, I helped him shift from advertising in the Post to having an email newsletter. And he actually gave up spending $100,000 a year in advertising to run, spending $30 a month on an AOL account that he ran a huge email list out of it, like 10,000 people eventually on it, for this retail store. And he used to send out emails 3 times a week. And it worked. And that kind of consistent relationship always, kept this business running that was doing $5 million a year. It was a retail store, and it was really tremendous to see him do that. And what I've seen is that just all the work that I've done with my wife and around relationships is that for relationships to build trust, we need to be present with people. And building a sense of trust, mostly marketing, but let me talk for a second about where I'm leading with this, is that what marketing's true job is. Marketing, a lot of people think that marketing's job is attraction, and this is not true. Marketing's job is not to attract people in, because that is the realm of the heart. That's love. Attraction has to do with love, and the love in your heart is what's going to attract people in. And when people try to create attraction in their marketing is when marketing starts to feel weird. It starts to feel off. It starts to feel gross or disconnected or hypey. And we know it. We can sense when the caring's not there, when the love's not there. However, because of the experiences that we've had in our lives, when we encounter love, the heart is happy, but the ego, our egos, our lower selves freak out. And it freaks out. It's like, am I going to get my heart broken? Are you an axe murderer? Am I going to get dumped? Am I going to get hurt like I've been hurt before? And so marketing's job is to create safety. That's marketing's job, is to create safety so that the right people can heed the call of love, the ones who are truly attracted to what you're offering, the ones who you're meant to help. Not everybody, just the people you're meant to help can heed the call of love in their heart. And that safety is created in a number of different ways. And one of the ways is consistency, is showing up and showing up and showing up, because this tells people that you're not a fly-by-night operation, that you're there and that you really mean what you say and that you're going to be there over and over again. There's people that swoop in, do a lot of really hard, big push marketing and then are gone and disappear. Do you really trust those folks? Are they really going to be there for you if you have a problem in 6 months? But when you see a business that's been around for a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, and they're just consistently showing up every week or, on a really consistent basis, then this trust begins to build in your heart, and you begin to trust them and know them and see them, and then you can begin to trust, like, oh, okay, my heart is probably right about this. I probably can step forward and start to connect with them.
Yeah, it again comes back down to the actual factor that this takes time. So when I observe myself with, say, I'm getting in touch or discovering someone new, it takes time for me to start to trust them, even join their newsletter, then buy something. And we go through these phases, or I think you call them journeys, where things just take time, and it takes time to build up that trust.
Mm-hmm. We have someone in our premium year-long program right now who had been on our email list for 6 years. 6 years. This isn't that unusual. 6 years. They had bought one thing from us, in the very beginning, a very, low-cost book that we were selling, and they hadn't done anything else with us. And then they jumped into our premium program, and I think that, I see that often. This is where momentum comes from. When you're around for long enough, and the people who are waiting for the right timing, for the timing in their lives to really be, okay, now I need help from this person. And if it takes if you have a whole bunch of people, and some of them take 6 months, and some of them take a year, and some of them take a year and a half, and some of them take 2 weeks, and some of them take 5 years, and it's like this is why the longer you're around, the more consistency you can build in your business, because you'll have more of those people that are going to be at that point of readiness and will have taken the time to have built up trust with you.
Yeah, and that brings me to the next question, which is, how do you build an audience? How do you actually start the process of getting people on that first journey with you, which is joining the newsletter, or an earlier journey?
Right. So you mentioned the journeys. I break marketing up into 3 journeys of marketing, because a lot of people, when they think about marketing, they think kind of monolithic. Oh, I've got to go do marketing. But the truth is that people are at different, like we've been talking about, at different stages of relationship with your business. And so first journey marketing is what I call the introductory marketing, the first contact that you make with someone, where, maybe it's advertising on Facebook, maybe it's a guest blog on somebody else's blog, maybe it's a talk that you gave at a local store, maybe it's a brown bag lunch that you gave at a company. It's like some place where somebody makes their first contact with you. And then your only goal in first journey marketing is not to try to sell them, because if you try to sell them, what's going to happen is that you may have one or two people that are at that point of readiness and they just feel that sense of love and connection. And they're like, okay, yeah, this is perfect. I'm going to jump in. But the vast majority of people, many of whom will become your clients in time, aren't ready to buy, but they're interested. And so what you want to do is you want to, as much as possible, convert them into the second journey of marketing. And the second journey of marketing is when you have some kind of a consistent connection with them. And this is almost invariably some sort of a mailing list. It can be a postcard. It can be an email list. It's something where you are reaching out to them and giving to them in a generous way, in a way that's helpful, in a way that connects, the way that helps them to trust that you're really there and that you know what you're talking about, and that they get to know who you are. But it's sustainable for you. It's like I write these articles once a week and they go out, but it's the same amount of effort for me, whether there's 1,000 people or 10,000 people on my list, on my email list. And so it's something sustainable for you and it's effective. And then there's a sacred moment, which we deal with in our course, Sacred Selling, which is the moment where they're ready and they need to go into this really this vulnerable place of electing to have the relationship change from a one-way relationship of receiving from you into a two-way relationship of giving and receiving, meaning they're purchasing something from you, they're giving to you, and they're receiving from you. At that point, you work with them, you sell to them, you give them, and hopefully you wow them enough that they will enter your third journey of marketing. And third journey of marketing is when you support them and educate them to be referrals, to bring referrals to you back into your first and second journeys.
So I guess the next question is, when you, and obviously again, this takes time. It takes time to get people on your newsletter. And
Yes.
like you said, sometimes it takes years, many years before
an individual is ready. Right.
Yeah. So the next question is, what if someone is just starting out, they're building their newsletter, they're getting people interested in what they have to offer. How do they figure out what offers will resonate with people and what problems they can solve?
Yes. Well, it's going to take some trial and error. I mean, quite frankly, it takes some trial and error. You can go to somebody who knows what they're doing and has had experience, so they can maybe shortcut your trial and error period, and they can also perhaps help you present it in a way that's really effective and will resonate with folks. But what you're wanting to do to start out is the kind of sustainable marketing that happens in time when you have a larger audience is something that's not quite as effective in the early stages of business. And so the early stages of business, I encourage people to have higher priced more premium products where maybe it's one-on-one services with somebody, maybe it's something that's more engaged, and to spend more time actually engaged with people. So for an example, I had this client I was talking about before, who, instead of her just looking to build her newsletter list, I had her actually go on a campaign of how many free sessions could she do. And she was trying to do like 30 or 40 free sessions in a month's time. And just to get in front of a lot of different people. Now, you're not going to have nearly the same conversion rate. Like, not as nearly as many of those people are going to convert into paying clients as they would later if they came through a more maybe sustainable, organic type of process where they're reading your newsletter and then they come make an inquiry and then they want to talk to you. But she's still, using our sacred selling process, using an approach to having that kind of a session that isn't just about doing a session. It's more about really connecting and assessing and understanding how to conduct that conversation. She was able to convert a significant number. I'm trying to remember the percentage. It was probably, 30 or 40% to paying clients. And so she ended up with 9 or 10 clients out of that effort, which was really significant to her at the time. I mean, it'd be really significant to anybody in private practice. And so that's what I really recommend, is that people start out by trying to engage with as many people as possible, and letting the personal contact of the heart, by being in front of people and talking to people, to make it move more rapidly, because those relationships move more rapidly when they have personal contact as opposed to just reading something from you.
Yeah. And you mentioned the sacred selling process. I know it's very involved or in depth because you have a whole program about it, but could you cover like the core factors that go into that?
Yes, I can. So there's sacred selling has 6 elements to it. 3 of them are preparations, and 3 of them have to do with the conversation itself. And the preparations have to do with crafting your offer, meaning you want to create your offer so that it is something that is appealing to people, that can almost sell itself. Half the battle is actually just having an appealing offer that people actually want to buy. A lot of times people are out there trying to sell sessions. This is for service professionals in particular, trying to sell sessions or a widget. And you need to make your offer look like what it really is, which is a way for people to solve their problem or achieve what they're trying to achieve or get where they're trying to get to. And so you usually create some kind of a package or a program or something that really carries people forward. So that's crafting your offer. Then you want to price it, and you have to price it from the heart. You don't want to price it so low that you're collapsed and it feels gross, and you don't want to price it so high that you don't feel like you can settle into yourself. So we teach a way to really find the resonant price, the price that resonates with your heart. And then there's another preparation process that has to do with getting clear on the details of how you enroll people. When people pay, and is there a contract, and those kinds of things, so you don't stutter when you get to that part. When somebody says yes, and you go well then, and you want that process to be smooth, have to say yes. Then the conversation. So those 3 are the preparations prior to the conversation. And then the conversation itself, the sales conversation itself, is 3 sections as well. One is connection. And connection is purely done at a heart level. We do this exercise with people that is done completely without words. And when we've done it in person, it is amazing what you see. You see people, tears coming into their eyes. You see people just spontaneously moving towards the person who's playing the role of the business owner. You're seeing this really like losing defensive. People can't hold defensiveness in the face of this connection process. And it really has to do with opening the heart and receiving the person and really seeing them. And it can be done over the phone and by distance, but it's remarkable to see the effects in person. The second part of the conversation has to do with what we call compassionate questioning. And compassionate questioning, a lot of times in sales conversations, salespeople, people who are doing the selling, yak about their thing, instead of asking questions and really finding out what's going on for the other person so that the person really feels seen. And then when those 2 pieces are handled to a certain, effectively, they don't have to be done perfectly, they just have to be done effectively, you come to this place of the agreement. And the agreement is just coming to that place where it's really obvious whether the person is going to move forward with you or not. And there's some questions that you can ask about that and how to handle that. But then when this all comes together, people just suddenly feel so much more comfortable in this process, and it really works. People start to enroll a surprisingly high percentage of interested people instead of losing them to, well, I need to think about it, and then you never hear
Yeah.
from them again.
So you actually got me curious when you talked about the process of opening your heart. What would what would it look like if you're talking to someone over Skype or over the phone of
Mm.
opening the heart?
Well, what it does is there's a sequence of connection that is required. And the sequence of connection is that first you have to face whatever feelings you're actually having. A lot of people try to do these conversations on top of feelings of neediness or fear or disconnection, anxiety. Instead, just noticing, wow, my heart is really needy. I'm really thirsty here. And letting yourself receive in your own heart. Because that's the second step, is connecting to the divine, connecting to yourself. Then the second step is connecting to the divine and receiving what your heart needs and letting your heart be filled. And then the third step is finally connecting to the person you're speaking to. And connecting the person you're speaking to is also receiving. When I was in Sufi healing school and then I became an assistant, one of the things that we used to do with people is like, how do you connect spiritually to a client? And a lot of people would try to, and it's very funny because you'd see people kind of like gritting their teeth and clenching their belly muscles and, trying to like somehow reach out spiritually to people. But that's actually backwards, because what we're doing is we're not reaching out to them. All of our senses, our physical senses, appear to be reaching out. Our eyesight appears to go out, but really all our senses are receptive. And this is true for the heart. Light enters our eyes. Smells enter, molecules of smell enter our nose. Tastes enter our mouth and touch our tongue. Sound waves enter our ear. And it's the same for the heart. The heart receives other people's hearts. It receives the other person. And so to open my heart and just to receive, when someone is received, it's almost impossible for someone else to be received sincerely and to keep a closed heart. It's just the natural experience is, oh yeah, here's someone who really sees me. We're so yearning to be seen and witnessed for who we are and not judged, and to be accepted and to be loved, that when somebody can really receive us, it's incredibly nourishing and healing.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I'm just breathing here and smiling.
Mm-hmm.
So I have one last question. I think this is a good place to wrap things up, and that is, how do you help people resolve inner blocks and what seem like sometimes irrational fears that stop people from moving forward?
Every fear is an expression of a legitimate need of the heart. And it is going to be impossible to bypass a fear through thinking. What you need to do is you need to let yourself face the fear, and as much as possible release the story around the fear, because the fear, when we feel scared or we feel blocked, we make up a story, because what the story does is it takes us into our head and removes us, distances us somewhat from the fear. It's actually a way of protecting us from an uncomfortable feeling. It's quite clever. The mind is quite clever in this way, and it's incredibly powerful, because it can, there's lots of people out there who live in their minds and they're disconnected from their bodies and disconnected from their hearts, and it's really been extremely effective, and to the point where they can't really feel what's going on. Unfortunately, there's all kinds of painful side effects to that, disease and etc. But so what we do is we just say, first we start by embracing the feeling and kind of letting go of the reasons why, and just saying, I'm just scared. I'm just feeling fear. And then you can begin the process through remembrance or another practice like the one we teach, to let your heart begin to access what it really needs. and to be really nourished, to access love, to access compassion, to drink that in, to witness that it's already present. Is love available even here? And that enables the heart to feel full. And then we move right back into what we were discussing earlier. How are you moved when your heart is full? And that inevitably allows someone to take a step forward. And then they might feel scared again. And you know what? It's okay. You just repeat that process. Because the point of guidance isn't so that we can do everything right and end up where we're supposed to be. The point of guidance is to keep us close to the source of love. And if we keep having to go back to our heart frequently because we don't know what's going on or because we're feeling fear, it means that we're going to learn how to live with love much more often. We're going to be able to live with love for much more of our lives than feeling like we have to go out there and do everything.
That's such a well put, sir. And I think we'll wrap things up there. This has been an amazing conversation. And before we say goodbye, where can people learn more about you?
Well, I encourage anyone who's resonated with what I'm talking about, please find us at heartofbusiness.com and subscribe to our newsletter. Find out, if what I'm saying really resonates with you. And there's a workbook that we give away that teaches the remembrance and teaches how to start to identify the jewel in your heart that I was talking about before, so you can be more conscious about it and start to live with love in your business a bit more. And so that's what I encourage people to start with, and then they can see for themselves.
Yeah, and I definitely recommend anyone listening to this who resonates with what Mark has said to check his stuff out, because it's fantastic. I mean, I definitely enjoy it. So thanks again, Mark, for doing this interview. It's been a pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Henry.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. It was fantastic having Mark on to share some of his wisdom and experience. Now, I highly recommend you re-listen to this episode at least once, because you'll get even more out of it. So that's all for this episode. Remember, if you want more tips on how to turn your passion into a thriving lifestyle business, come visit wakeupcloud.com and make sure you join the free newsletter and grab your free goodies. So this is Henry signing out. Bye for now.